Madam Speaker, and it's very good to be back on the floor of the House of Commons. Like so many parliamentarians, I've been participating virtually for months, so it really feels great to be here today with you and with everyone in the House. And I'm pleased today to put some thoughts on the record concerning Bill C-273, an act to establish a national strategy for guaranteed basic income. So what is a guaranteed basic income? Well, there are many different policy iterations of it, but on the whole, it would essentially be monthly checks to every Canadian, and some of the policy iterations of this would provide basic checks to children as well. And the amount tends to vary depending on the plan, and some having a few $100s a month, and others that see it more providing as a means to cover all basic necessities like CERB, which was, of course, $2,000 a month. So in simple terms, a guaranteed basic income is like CERB, but for everyone forever. And the Parliamentary Budget Officer has estimated that a national guaranteed basic income could cost $85 billion per year, rising to $93 billion per year in 2025-2026. And to pay for this at the federal level, Canadians could expect to see a tripling of the GST that currently sits at 5%, or increasing personal income taxes to 50%. And introducing a basic income following the costliest year in Canadian history, where federal government spending hit $650 billion in 2020 and is predicted to hit $510 billion in 2021, is cause for concern, especially since we've received really no viable, tangible strategy of how the Liberals are going to raise enough revenue from taxpayers to responsibly pay back the $354 billion of deficits from 2020 or the $154 billion of deficits predicted for 2021. And to think, Madam Speaker, it was just 6 short years ago that the federal budget was a mere $298 billion. And the Liberals have doubled Canada's national spending during their time in office. And now they want to talk about adding another $93 billion permanent spending program to the bottom line. And I think Canadians are reasonably concerned about this. But the basic income proposal is more than about spending, of course. We know it's essentially one of the main arguments is to address poverty. And policy proponents argue that the benefits to the country's social fabric will outweigh the costs. And in 2019, Statistics Canada estimated that 3.7 million Canadians, or 1 of 10, live below the poverty line. And a 529-page report, quite a lengthy report, by researchers and economists at 3 leading Canadian universities concluded after a 3-year investigation that a basic income would not be the best way to address poverty. Rather, the report found that government should focus on improving existing programs that are already targeted to those who really need them. For example, help with rental assist, or to youth aging out of the child welfare system, or perhaps Canadians living with disabilities. And proponents of the basic income argue it will help those living at the extreme inequalities in Canada, those that are homeless, for example. And often we know that those who suffer from homelessness also suffer from severe addictions, with the two often feeding into one another. But I have grave concerns with the impact of basic income on Canadians suffering from addictions. And we know COVID-19 has had severe, extreme, and deathly outcomes in Canada since the COVID-19 pandemic began. And in fact, overdoses have killed more people by far than COVID-19. In Toronto, fatal suspected opioid overdoses calls into paramedics were up 90% in 2020, and in Manitoba, 372 overdose deaths were recorded last year, which is a full 87% jump from the year prior. And in British Columbia, the latest data tells us that an average of 5 people die every single day from illicit drug overdoses, with 500 people having died in the first 3 months of 2021 alone. And in fact, Canada-wide, in the 6 months following the implementation of the COVID-19 lockdowns and restriction measures, there were 3,351 apparent opioid toxicity deaths, representing a 74% increase from the 6 months prior. A truly devastating statistic, Madam Speaker. So now, what happens if you send a monthly check of thousands of dollars to those who are severely addicted to drugs? Well, when CERB was first introduced, a constituent of mine, a mother, called me in desperation, terrified that her adult son, who was unemployed and didn't qualify for CERB, would apply for CERB, get it, and have a severe and possibly deadly relapse. Frontline workers confirm this fear, like those at Winnipeg's Main Street Project, who have said they believe that CERB has hiked drug use and contributed to opioid abuse and addiction. This is a real concern about basic income that I have, and I really haven't heard a coherent solution to address it. And it is difficult to break out of the poverty cycle. We know this, Madam Speaker. The data tells us that once a person has been unemployed for more than a year, it can be extremely difficult to rejoin the labor market, and it can create a dependency on social programs and a disincentive to work. In this sense, a basic income could create a permanent underclass in Canada. And importantly, Madam Speaker, there is an inherent dignity in work. But MPs are hearing from small businesses in our communities across Canada, particularly in the service industry and the construction field, that it is more difficult now than ever to hire workers, that prospective employees are opting to stay home on government emergency support programs rather than going to work. Now, millions of Canadians are, of course, working and taking whatever work they can find, but some are not. And we know working and earning an income provides both economic and social benefits. It's necessary to provide for oneself and one's family, and also boosts confidence through earned satisfaction of a paycheck. It provides purpose, builds personal responsibility, personal growth, perseverance. It provides daily structure, a reason to get out of bed in the morning, and we know it contributes to our personal identities. Many people say, I'm a nurse, or I'm a truck driver, a scientist, or a small business owner. It's part of who we are. And as Sean Spear said in the National or Financial Post a few years ago, quote, work is one of those crucial activities and institutions that underpins the good life. Recently, my grandfather passed away, and he was 91 and born in the prairies of the last pioneer generation in Canada. There were very few government support programs in his early days, and CERB and public health care were unheard of at the time, and people really simply had to work very hard every day or they wouldn't eat. Now we have developed a kinder, more compassionate society that takes care of people when they fall on hard times, and that's very good. My grandparents' generation built the strong, prosperous country that allows for this type of public generosity in Canada. However, near the end of his life, my grandfather remarked, sometimes to him it seemed young people feel a sense of entitlement to an easy life of comfort, free from struggle. And as a young person, I do get that sense as well. And last year, when CERB was first introduced and the Liberals were creating a student version of it, it happened to be at the same time that our country's food resources were at risk. And every year, Canada brings in about 40,000 temporary foreign workers, generally from Central America, to work in our agriculture sector, to produce the food that feeds Canadians and, in fact, feeds the world. But with the border closures, it was very difficult to get these workers in, and our food supply chains were at risk. And now, with tens of thousands of service sector jobs in tourism, hospitality, and the restaurant and bar industry closed, many students who relied on that work for summer employment, I used to be one of them, did not have, obviously, these same opportunities. So Conservatives suggested at the time, just over a year ago, why not have able-bodied young people full of energy work as a temporary measure in our agriculture sector, picking fruit, working in the fields, living on farms for the summer, contributing to the COVID effort, and really securing our food supply chains. But this proposal was met with quite a bit of apprehension, to say the least. And in fact, when I consulted university student leaders during committee on this idea, one student said, and I will never forget this quote, "We go to university so we don't have to do those jobs." That's what she said. And this quote was coming from a student who was at a committee meeting asking for government handouts for students. The student benefit was important, and I'm glad it was provided. However, I found these comments very discouraging, not just for the younger generation, but for what was implied, that a labor job or an entry-level job with limited requirements for complex skills or education was somehow not respectable, or those jobs were beneath certain Canadians, notably some student university elites, apparently, who looked down their noses, perhaps, at an honest day's work in the sun. And really, what does that message send to those aspiring to break into the job market at the bottom of the ladder, or the millions of Canadians who are having to work at minimum wage jobs? I was one of them, and I worked in dozens of these types of jobs, in restaurants, retail, manual labor. I've done them all, and I'm a better person for it, and it taught me the value of hard work. It shaped my work ethic and character. I learned many valuable skills that really carry me today, and I could go on about the value of working part-time since I was 14 on and off has added to my life. And we know that there's no better way out of poverty than getting a job, and even when you have to start from the bottom. The experience and skills and socialization are ultimately unmatched. So in conclusion, Madam Speaker, that's why the Conservatives and the Leader of the Official Opposition, the member for Durham, are focused on jobs recovery plan from the economic destruction of the COVID-19 pandemic. Priority number one for a federal Conservative government would be to recover and create 1 million jobs and get every industry in Canada firing on all cylinders and leaving no demographic or region of the country behind. And meanwhile, the Liberals are here today to talk about basic income, more money for everyone forever, and really we know that's not a jobs plan. It's certainly not an economic recovery plan. And Conservatives want to create an inclusive economic recovery that will build a stronger Canada with more opportunities for everyone, so that they can succeed in the job market and not need to collect checks from the government every month. And that is our focus and will be our number one priority should we form government after the next election. Thank you, Madam Speaker.